Hey, welcome back, everyone. This is Corey.
And this is Dave.
Hi, and Scott, too.
Scott has become a pirate at some point.
Oh, and I swear to God, it's awful. I'm sitting here waiting for Praise Satan, and you don't do it. And then
so conditioned. It's like Pavlovian at this
point. The awkward silence.
I started laughing before. Yeah, Praise Satan, yeah.
No, it's too late now.
Yeah, you ruined it.
Fine. Dude, no, let me do it again then. It's like, and this is Scott, Praise Satan.
Hey, there you go. Okay, there.
Okay, all right.
Does that feel better?
I feel like my cheese have been aligned at this point.
Yeah, better late than never.
I like to align your chakras with saying that. Whatever.
Thank you. That actually, you know what? You're right. Chakra was the word I was looking for, not chi. I don't know why I said chi.
Kimchi? I know her. Anyways.
She smells like cabbage, though.
Kimchi. Wasn't that one of the Cabbage Patch Kids? No, anyway.
Oh.
But thank you. I'll be here all week. We are whittling down our last round of 32. We've got 2 shows left. I guess this is where we would drop an intro if we have one.
This is where we will drop an intro once an intro is actually created.
Lube
yes,
it up,
this is where it will
squeeze
go.
it in.
Yeah,
here.
intros are kind of created after. If you haven't caught on yet.
Welcome back, all you hepcats and chili chasers. This episode is called Black and Blue, inspired by a couple of the albums up on deck. So tonight, we're coming to you live from the Black and Blue Club, a jazzy little joint where we're gonna blow our lids and get all hopped up on the sweetest licks this side of Crazy Town. You dig? We're down to the last 24 albums of our little cutting contest, and today, we're gonna find out which ones are the true jump kings and which ones are just moldy figs, daddy-o. So hold on to your zoot suits and watch out for that bug disease, because the chops are flying, the bass is thumping like a duck on a pogo stick, and that hi-hat's got more zip than a Zamboni on ice. So let's hoochie-coochie to the flip side, razzmatazz the flim-flam, and bebop till we flibber-flabber the kablooey kazoo-kazoo bazooka joe and the hot tamale tango. Because this is musical shamango mango skip-scat garee-boop-de-boop-bop. Wait, is this every breath you take? What the fuck? Good God, it's bad enough when Sting does this shit. See, this is why nobody likes jazz. Jesus Christ.
All right, anything we need to announce? Like you said, Corey, this is our top 16 from our main bracket, our top 16 from our wild card bracket that we did going head to head. And we're at this point, we're about halfway through it. We got one more, we get to do this today, and then we got one more show after this, and then we will be down to our final 16, and then it's just kind of all downhill from here.
Yeah, we got some weird matchups today.
Yes, we do.
Indeed.
Perfect segue.
Good segue, Corey. You want to kick this off?
Our first matchup are a couple of bands going through transition periods. One of these bands had just fired half the band and reworked and re-recorded some of the songs for their album, and the other band was done doing that touring thing and ready to do some serious songwriting in the studio. The first album is Yankee Hotel Foxtrot by Wilco, and it was something of a breakthrough for them after being dropped by their label and yet somehow managed to get this album to see the light of day. It is a piece of work that we have coined the musician's album because there is a lot to love and appreciate in these 11 songs. Wilco, however, finds themselves up against the Beatles' Rubber Soul. And what can we say about the Beatles that anyone has not already? Rubber Soul was a breakaway from what was Beatlemania and the releasing of albums loaded with singles, and the beginning of looking at an album as an art form. Of course, as the artistic level started to heighten, so did the tension in the band, and some even point back to this album as the beginning of the end for the Beatles, as their artistic arguments began. The Beatles got here by beating out The Writings on the Wall by Destiny's Child, The Freewheelin' Bob Dylan by Robert Zimmerman, and Wilco fought their way here by beating out Time, The Revelator by Gillian Welch. Name pronunciation is up to you, however you like it.
We don't care. We hated it. We don't care.
Kill me.
Well, that's not fair. We didn't hate it, but we didn't love it, put it that way.
Exactly.
I hated it. It's okay. I hated it.
And after Gillian, the Beatles beat out To Pimp a Butterfly by Kendrick Lamar.
No.
Oh, no, you're right.
Wilco beat out Time the Revelator by Gillian Welch, then To Pimp a Butterfly in round 2, and then Tommy by The Who in round 3. It's literally written in front of you, Corey. I don't know how you're fucking this up. But.
You know when you do that and I'm high, it really fucks with me. And yet you're doing it and you're not high, so that amazes me, I think.
So they beat out To Pimp a Butterfly, and then they finally beat up that deaf, dumb, and blind kid Tommy by The Who in the lightning round. All right, so let's kick this off with the easy one, with Wilco.
Yeah, with Wilco.
Because we just spoke about them recently.
Yeah, well, we just spoke about a lot of these recently in our lightning round, where we went through pretty much everything that was still left on the main bracket. But yeah, Wilco is a band that came together. They grew out of Jeff Tweedy's prior act, which was called Uncle Tupelo, which was sort of an alt country act. This he pulled together. The name comes from the phrase "will comply," which is military code. They'll give you a Wilco, sort of shorthand for "will comply." That's relevant because the name of the album as well kind of comes from military code. Yankee Hotel Foxtrot is from the military lettering system, like where you'll say a word so that no confusion whether you said F or S, because you say Foxtrot and everybody knows which one it is. So that's where the title of this comes from. And it's weird. It's not necessarily bad weird, but it's weird. Jeff Tweedy had gone through a bad breakup. He was dealing with a lot of confusing emotions, and he was trying to write stuff that would kind of capture that sense of confusion. There's a few songs on here that are fairly conventional, but a lot of it is... What these two albums have in common is there's a lot of experimentation from both the Beatles and Wilco in this round.
At this point, after this album is when they let Jay Bennett go. Jay Bennett had come into the band earlier, really helped define Wilco's sound, give them a whole new audience. He was instrumental with their Mermaid Avenue album they did with Billy Bragg, where they pulled out old... Who was Arlo Guthrie's... Woody?
God.
Woody Guthrie.
Yes, Woody Guthrie, thank you.
Woody Guthrie albums that they pulled out of the archive and all. And Jay Bennett was a multi-instrumentalist, always coming up with new ideas, and he was really adding too much to a lot of these songs. And Jeff Tweedy at some point just said, I want my band back. This is becoming the Jay Bennett band. And not as a slight against him, but just Tweedy just had a direction of where he wanted to go, and that wasn't it. So you had both Bennett and the drummer summarily fired during these sessions. Bennett's mix, because Bennett was also becoming something of a producer and mixing the album, so all of his mixes got thrown out. And then when you bring in Jim O'Rourke now, who has a more avant-garde angle, the album sounds completely different, and a lot of the experimental sounds and instruments were also from Jim O'Rourke. But like we said, this is... I don't know what the other album would have sounded like comparatively. Maybe not as what Dave calls weird. Maybe it would have been a little more conventional, but this is what Tweedy wanted, and it's great output.
To be clear, I said weird, but not weird in a bad way. Just
No.
Weird in the sense of being unconventional and kind of inaccessible to a lot of people, I'm sure. There's a lot of these songs here where if you're a casual listener of pop music and if you spend all your time listening to the top 40 and you put this album, you're going to sit there going, what the fuck is this? But it is, it works. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it works.
Yeah, no, it does. As a musician, I approach this and it's like, oh, cool. And a lot of it is cool, but then I think, okay, for instance, I was watching a Crypta show today, death metal Brazilian, on YouTube, and I was like, and their songs are 6-8 minutes. I'm like, there ain't no kid. That's what I mean. Kids today, the most interesting thing in music right now is metal, because at least they're doing different shit. Pop music's become such a drag, So
yeah, a lot of pop music. I mean, that's not
this album though. Really is like, yeah, it's a little musician-y, laggy. They thought more. They did some damn good writing on this.
It's a nice break from the usual.
And that's the reason we called it a musician's album, because if you spend a lot of time, as much time I think probably as the three of us do, like listening to music, thinking about music, to your point, Scott, you hear the same things over and over and over again, and nothing sounds new anymore. This sounds new. Yeah. This is somebody actually trying something that is wholly different from everything you heard. Not just wholly different from everything you were hearing in 2002, but frankly, even today in 2024, it still sounds wholly different from everything that's on the radio.
Yeah, that's true. It's very proggy in a sense.
That's you know what, that's a good word for it.
Perfect. Yeah, because like we've pointed out, we can spot a Robert John Mutt Lang song from 30 Paces, and now Jack Antonoff.
Yeah.
You could just pick them out and go, oh, that's who produced this. They have defining sounds. We did spend a lot of time on this album recently, right before the lightning round,
right,
and into the lightning round. So let's move on to Rubber Soul that we've not discussed in quite some time.
I think I even told a story about Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, didn't I? Oh, did Lord. You? Yeah, I think that was in one of my story phases.
It was obviously super memorable because I don't remember it at all.
It must have been.
I don't think it was a Skinwalker, but
No, maybe it was the Skinwalker one. Oh God, yeah.
I don't know. But
anyway,
this was the Beatles when they were finally done.
Yeah.
Like I said, being on the road, they were wanting to spend more time in the studio and actually create music. And I think this is where we start to see everybody coming in and making their own individual contributions.
Yes.
As far as it's not it's not the, okay, we're going to make something that we know is going to be a single. They've already got the formula down. They know how to spit those songs out, even with, and I'm not trying to cheapen anything they had done up until this point, but because everything they had done was great, but they had a formula and they knew what worked, but they still came in and went and didn't want to do the same thing again.
Well, yeah, I mean, they were making little 2.5, 3 minute poppy songs up to this point.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But
No.
this is the first point where both John and McCartney's writing kind of takes a step up. Norwegian Wood is actually all about an affair that John had, and one of several affairs that John had behind his first wife's back. In My Life is all about John sort of reflecting about people who have helped him and been there along the way. I'm Looking Through You as McCartney, but he's writing very openly. I'm Looking Through You is all about actually an argument he had with his then girlfriend, and he was questioning whether she was really kind of committed to the relationship.
She was an actress and really spending a lot more time away. So
Right.
they didn't have time together.
This is also I won't say the end of the Lennon and McCartney show, but the point where it ceases to be primarily a two-man act. Because now you even have George coming into his own as a songwriter. The song "If I Needed Somebody" was a Harrison composition. Even Ringo comes in and starts writing here for one of the first times. So to your point, like they're bringing in a lot of stuff. It was sort of born of necessity, because they were trying to get, to your point, Corey, they'd just come in off the road. They were trying to get an album out by the Christmas holiday. Like they had a contractual commitment with their label where they were trying to crank something out. And so this was sort of they come into the studio and it's like they did not have a lot of time. And so it was sort of like this, like, okay, no bad ideas, whatever anybody's got, bring it to the table. And we told that story the first time we talked about this, but I didn't even realize how rushed it was. 7 of the tracks on this album were written inside of 1 week.
Wow.
Yeah, that's crazy. And most of them are like, classics, like Nowhere Man is Here. Like I mentioned, just some of the others that are big Beatles to him.
When they were rushing it out for Christmas, the 2 tracks that didn't make it that they released as singles were Day Tripper and We Can Work It. I think it was We Can Work It Out. I know it was Day Tripper. But
I think this album highlighted the strongest songwriting skills at that point. And it's like, okay, this is what can happen when they sit down for a minute and figure things out. And you talked about the album being rushed to record, but obviously some of these things had been worked out to a degree. And, once they got it on tape, bam, wow, magic. What a great album, musically speaking.
And this goes back to something else we said. They're all individually good, but collectively they're better.
Yeah, for sure.
And the best bands fit that mold. Like the second it becomes a one-person show, that's usually when the quality starts dropping off.
Oh, yeah. Almost every time.
And I think that might go back to what we just talked about with Wilco. Jay Bennett was pretty much taking over the band. He was coming in with all these different instruments, the different productions and everything, and Jeff Tweedy's just like, why am I now just a member of a band I've founded?
One thing I noted about this album this time is, I don't have a name to credit here, but I was reading somebody online, so forgive me, dude, whoever said this, and can't credit you. But somebody made the point that this is this transition between the simple, happy, poppy song Beatles and the more experimentation, studio-driven Beatles. And one positive thing about this album is, regardless, there are camps out there. There are some people that love the early Beatles. There are some people that think that, the early stuff wasn't that impressive and it's the experimental stuff later. This is a pivot point, and you actually get a little bit of both on this album. So, like, no matter which iteration of the Beatles you're a fan of, you're going to find some of it on this album.
For sure. Like I said, there's so much very strong songwriting on this. I mean, anybody who's heard the Beatles has heard some of the stuff off Rubber Soul.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Guarantee. So you can't, its place in American culture is pretty solidified in a lot of ways.
Agreed.
Right.
one thing we've said before is there's one track on here that is absolutely did not age well called Run for Your Life. It's basically John Lennon singing that, if you leave me for another man, I'm going to hunt you down and kill you. It's just a tad misogynistic, and especially when we know what we know now about John Lennon actually did have kind of a history of hitting women too, so like it makes it even worse.
Yeah.
Some other negatives here, as usual. I shit all over Ringo sometimes, but the guy was a solid drummer. But his songwriting, not so much, so the Ringo songs are a little bit questionable.
I don't think he wrote that one. I think he was only the singer on it. It was written by Lennon and McCartney. It's a song, What Goes On. Oh, it was written by all three of them, Lennon, McCartney, and Starkey. Yeah, so I guess he is part songwriter on this.
So there's that, and then, of course, another big negative of this album, this is Scott. This one will speak to Scott. This album came out, and it really inspired Brian Wilson to go write Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. So
lying in bed just like Brian Wilson did. I want to talk about Pet Sounds. God, kill me now.
Well, that was the Bare Naked Ladies, but yeah.
Fuck, I know. I hate those fuckers too. Rocket to the sun, baby. Rocket to the sun for both of. Just out of here.
If I remember like the chronology here, Rubber Soul comes out, Brian Wilson is blown away, and he sits down and writes Pet Sounds. Pet Sounds comes out, and the Beatles are blown away, and now they feel like they've got a competition on their hands, so they sit down and write Sgt. Pepper's.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's exactly how that happens. One other thing I learned.
I'm sorry, Revolver. I'm sorry, I take that back. Revolver was their next album after this, not Sgt. Pepper's.
Right, but the iteration is still correct in the influence. Right. That Pet Sounds did influence Sgt. Pepper's. Yeah, because I think Revolver probably came out as the same time as Pet Sounds. Because once they were in the studio, they started knocking shit out quick.
Brian Wilson, you're a twat if you're listening.
I guarantee you he's not listening.
No.
God damn it.
No.
We lose our one celebrity listener.
I think we're ready to vote.
Yeah.
Scott, you're first.
Oh, it goes to the Beatles, maybe. Sorry, but,
Yeah. I'm second, and yeah, it's the Beatles.
Yeah, well, my vote doesn't matter, but believe it or not, I was going to go with Wilco.
Really?
Yeah,
wow.
my thought process being like the one hallmark, as I said earlier, of both of these albums is that they're both very experimental.
Yeah.
But this is before the Beatles. They were just kind of starting to figure out the experimentation, whereas Wilco really pushed the envelope a lot farther. But listen, I've said before, we're at a point of this competition where these are all good albums. So, like, there's not really a wrong answer at this point.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
There's
that's
not.
very true. Except in the next
But you're wrong.
Which is more... Yeah, you're wrong too, dude. Yeah, just no.
Not the first
Beatles
time.
was better. It's okay. It's all right to be wrong. It's like in the next one. I absolutely can't stand the next one. But, here we go. Here we are. So...
Great setup. Thank you.
Grab some grease and get ready, kids.
Our second matchup both come from the year 1971 with two artists that have each spawned numerous careers from their collective works and are still influential to this very day. The Thin White Duke, David Bowie, for those of you playing along at home, and not the persona he used for this album, so yes, mentioning it is somewhat anachronistic, and honestly, you're not even listening, what do you care? Bowie returns to this round of March Sadness with his album Hunky Dory, his fourth album, and follow-up to The Man Who Sold the World, and coming out with a diverse and eclectic album of folk, rock, pop, and art, presenting themes of change, identity, and alienation, setting the stage for future persona-driven albums. Bowie takes on an album that, as much as we have tried, has proven to be quite unflushable. Blue by Joni Mitchell is also a fourth album, and something of a diary of her gap year backpacking European vacation through Greece, Italy, and France, with an Appalachian... Yeah, with a gap year, yeah. Certain words just trigger you, don't they? Gap. Okay. Try that again. Gap.
The edible's a little stronger than usual this morning.
I know. Let's try this again. Blue by Joni Mitchell, also a fourth album. It's something of a diary of her gap year backpacking European vacation through Greece, Italy, and France with an Appalachian dulcimer in tow.
God, good luck mixing this, Corey.
I'll never think of it the same way again now. Thanks.
Do we need to just start this intro over at this point? I think
so.
You could try. Say roll with it. Yeah, okay. All right.
Okay, so Blue by Joni Mitchell. Her fourth album and my fourth trying to get through this is something of a diary of her year backpacking European vacation through Greece, Italy, and France with an Appalachian dulcimer in tow. Because according to Rick Steves, that is the perfect instrument to take with you when traveling across Europe. To date, Blue is cited as profoundly inspiring and influencing numerous artists across just as many numerous genres. This was one of the first confessional, hey, I'm gonna put my heart on a sleeve and bare my soul albums, paving the way for many other singer-songwriters to have such introspection in their lyrics, and later for daytime talk shows to explore and exploit the human experience through the likes of Donahue, Oprah, and Jerry Springer. To get here today, Blue beat out Janis Joplin's Pearl, Live Through This by Courtney Love's Hole, and Stevie Wonder's Inner Visions. And Bowie beat out Go Bo Diddley by Ellis Otha Bates, and The Wind, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle. The Wild, the Innocent, The Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle by Bruce Springsteen. And so, let's see if there is life on Mars, and start with David Bowie.
Oh, we're going to start with Bowie, okay.
Oh, are we?
Longest fucking intro.
Scott looked like he needed an oxygen tent for a second.
He did.
Yeah,
Poor guy.
I was enjoying that. That was well, I mean, yeah, whatever.
Figure we'll start with Hunky Dory. We haven't talked about it in a while, and then we'll come back to your favorite Unflushable.
No, that's fair.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
All right. So we just talked about how Beatles and Wilco were both going through transitions. Well, so was Bowie at this point. He had a few albums come out, mostly guitar-driven rock, and they really hadn't. They did okay, but they really weren't huge commercial successes. He was really starting to get nervous, and he was starting to worry. He'd had a huge single with Space Oddity, but he was really starting to worry that he was going to end up being a one-hit wonder, that it was going to be that song and nothing else. He sits down and writes some new stuff, and he sits down and writes some stuff that is, instead of being guitar-driven, a lot of it was more piano-driven. Boy, this thing just completely flipped the script. This is the start of finally Bowie turning into the Bowie that everybody knows and loves. And so the songwriting is strong, the instrumentation is new, even the cover art. This is sort of also the point where Bowie kind of embraces the androgyny kind of aspect. And the cover art is like a picture, it was inspired by Marlene Dietrich of sweeping his hair back, and it was like hand-tinted color, and he looks like he's wearing lipstick. So this is sort of like the first part of Bowie, not just kind of, you're right, Corey, he didn't create a character, but he kind of starts drifting in that direction of creating a character.
And I will say, as much as Ziggy Stardust is lauded, I like this album so much more.
Same.
I think this one, I think is so much stronger. I mean, I know it's the setup and that he's starting to, with the lyrics, start to figure out how to do these self-narratives of where it's a different narrator doing the song. You know, it's not David Bowie. It's a narrator of someone he's created. Of course, is what Dave just said, leads to him doing the more personas.
Absolutely.
But I felt like this was so much of a stronger album. In the ratings, I would have put this one above Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars.
I agree with you. There's a couple of tracks here that I don't love. So, for example, the song Kooks, which is charming in that he had just had a kid, and it was Kooks is sort of all about he and his then partner kind of fawning over their kid and trying to raise a family. This is like a sweet concept, but the song itself I could do without. But for the most part, a lot of these songs are just great. And Rick Wakeman, the organ player and keyboard player from Yes, who also played on this album, said that Bowie went out and recruited all these musicians. In particular, Wakeman is on this, Pete Townsend is on this, Tom Verlaine from Television is on this.
Mick Ronson
on guitar, exactly. So Bowie would write these songs, and then he would invite everybody over to from his house, and he would play them on a 12-string.
Oh, cool.
He would go through the chord progression. Wakeman said the first session where he went over and Bowie played several songs that he wanted to include on the album, Wakeman said, I drove home and I told my wife, I just heard the best collection of songs that I have ever heard before in my life, and this album is going to be huge. And Wakeman later went on to say, like, I had never made a statement like that prior to that, and I have never made a statement like that since that. Like, this was the one time we knew we had something huge on our hands.
Wow. That's amazing.
Especially coming from Wakeman.
Yeah, that's true.
This guy's played with every iteration of Yes.
He's keyboard royalty. Come on.
He's such royalty, he still wears a cape on stage. Yeah. As ridiculous as it looks.
He can get away with it.
You don't get more prog than that.
Right?
Coming out in a cape.
He's one of the original progsters.
No, he is. He really is. I know I always fangirl over Life on Mars, but I just fucking love that song.
What's not to love?
Yeah. It's a great song, and it's such a microcosm of like Bowie's writing from this point forward, because like Bowie had this knack. It was almost a Dylan skill of he would write lyrics where you go, okay, from Life on Mars, it's on America's tortured brow that Mickey Mouse has grown up a cow. Now the workers are struck for fame.
'Cause Lennon's on sale again. See the mice in their million hordes, from Ibiza to the Norfolk Broads. Rule Britannia is out of bounds.
My mother, my dog, and clowns. Like, what the fuck does that mean? But you hear him sing it, and it's like, I don't have a clue what the hell he's saying, but it's the coolest lyric I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
But it sounds so good.
Yeah. That's like some of the Japanese metal that I've listened to lately. I think they want to do a song in English so that the lyrics are always like, you don't know what they're singing about, because they often say things like, we got the dishpan hands, and you're like, what? And just to throw in an American something, and you're like, that's really weird. So
yeah, okay.
But this was, that would kind of become trademark Bowie from this point forward. Like, an awful lot of Bowie wrote up after this. Like, you just see that over and over again. Like, I don't know what he's saying, but I love the way he's saying it.
Yes.
I found that challenging at first with Bowie when I first.
Yes, I agree.
It was like I came very slowly around to him. Very slowly. Got to be honest, took me a long time. Still don't like some of his crap.
I did not realize Busta Rhymes. Yeah, hip-hop Busta Rhymes apparently went out on tour with Bowie, which I didn't even realize.
Really?
Wait, what?
But is a huge Bowie fan.
Wow.
So, like, I came across this quote. Busta Rhymes was being interviewed. I was raised on Bowie's music. Remember, I spent time in England when I was a little boy, which I didn't realize.
I didn't either.
Wham, Culture Club, David Bowie, all that shit was poppin'. Hunky Dory is the illest shit ever to me. I wanted to know about his recording process when making things like Space Oddity, what studios he used, and how he made money back then as opposed to now. Bowie had no problem allowing you to learn and ask questions. I remember I used to ask David why he dressed up in makeup and eyeliner and wore all the clothes he wore. He just said, I'm a free spirit and I wanted to do the shit I knew others wouldn't do. And I think that's like sort of laying the foundation for where Bowie went after this. Like, just something struck his head as something he was interested in, he would go do it. Like, in the same vein, Wakeman said if David wanted to know what it was like to walk down Oxford Street naked in London, he'd just go walk naked down Oxford Street in London. Like, he wouldn't sit there ruminating about it. He'd just go do it to see what the experience was.
Given all the different iterations of Bowie over the years, and not just his solo career, but do you remember the band Tin Machine?
No.
Yes. Yeah, that was Bowie. Bowie was in Tin Machine for a couple of years there in like the late 80s, early 90s, right?
Right.
Who else was in Tin Machine?
Oh, God, I knew you were going to ask
I don't
that.
think there was any big names.
I think he was the only big name.
Yeah.
Interesting.
If you remember the comedian Soupy Sales, his son was the drummer in that band.
Oh, really? Yeah, I remember.
That's the only thing I could tell you else about Tin Machine.
Ugh, stop being old, Scott. Quit it.
David I just looked it up. Bowie was obviously the headline in the band, but then I don't know, I don't recognize any of these names, but Reeves Gabrels?
Reeves Gabrels, yes.
Okay, well, he was in Tin Machine, whoever the fuck that is. I guess maybe there were two Sales brothers in the band, because there's a Tony Fox Sales and a Hunt Sales.
Oh, well then, yeah.
Oh, interesting. Wow. Soupy,
it's really good.
There. Oh, wait, Soupy's dead.
Go check it out.
Formed in 1988, dissolved in 1992.
Yeah, I mean, really good stuff.
in any case, back to Hunky Dory.
Wait.
Over it anymore.
We went off on a tangent of who was in Tin Machine, but you were going somewhere with that point.
I was. All the different iterations and everything else that he tried. And it was, this isn't going to sound like a David Bowie album. This is going to sound like I'm playing with another band. Yes, you're going to hear my voice, but it's not going to be anything you expect from me. And I think that is the essence of Bowie. He just did what he wanted to do. Even right down to the last album, Black Star.
Did not hear that.
Oh, that last album is sensational. The one he released right before his death.
Yeah,
Is it called Black Star? Am I fucking this up?
No, it's called Black Star. It's called Black Star.
Okay, all right. No, absolutely check that out. It is a culmination of like all of his works.
I'll give it a listen. Like I said, I got Amazon now, so yay.
There's a lot of stuff on Black Star where it's very clear he knew he was dying soon.
Yeah.
And wrote a lot of these songs as sort of like, there's one tune called Lazarus where he actually, like, the song opens with him saying, I'm in heaven now. Because, like, he knew by the time the song became a hit, he would be gone already.
It's eerie like Warren Zevon's last album.
Yes. Oh, God, The Wind is just perfect. I love that album.
He's writing songs about, was it Think About Me or...
Keep Me in Your Heart for a While.
Oh, I love the song.
Yeah, that'll fucking break your heart every time you hear it.
Oh, every goddamn time.
Yep.
Well, let's talk about songs that don't break our hearts. Blue.
Dude, do we have to? I'll say this. I hate this fucking album, and I hate Joni Mitchell, and I really can't stand anything by her, and I have no respect for this album and how it got here, so whatever.
I do have respect for this album and how it got here, but if I swear to God, if I have to listen to it again, I'm going to slam Scott's stick in a door.
I'll allow it. Bam, bam, ba bam.
Yeah, look,
yeah.
I'm not, okay, well, let's back up here. So first of all, Joni Mitchell, this was her fourth studio album. Corey, you alluded to this. She was like, spent a lot of time, took a break, went to Europe for a few years, had a couple of flings with men, then turned around and wrote this album of very honest songs about things in her life. There's one song in here we've talked about Little Green, which is about a daughter that she had given up for adoption when she was younger. Songs about men in her life that she'd had relationships with, including Graham Nash and James Taylor, and actually got this in a very like Fleetwood Mac Rumors like moment, right? Would write these songs critical of James Taylor and actually still got James Taylor to sing backup on the song. It's sort of famous for being open and honest, and Joni Mitchell gets a lot of credit for being a poet, but I have said before, I'm sorry, I don't think she is the poet that she gets the credit for.
It is the singer-songwriter's album.
That's
we
fair.
said Wilco's the musician's album. This is the singer-songwriter's album.
I will walk back my hatred enough to say, yeah, there's definitely talent. It's just
there's a lot of songwriters that use this as a template when they were going forward and creating their own art.
Yes.
It did inspire that. It is a huge influence.
Huge. Yes.
Including people we think very highly of, like Tori Amos and Prince and Bjork and Chrissie Hynde. This album is, I don't love it, but I have to acknowledge how influential it has been on other artists.
It is incredibly influential. Musically, it is a bit painful.
Yeah.
It is.
Like,
well, if you say so. I'll take your word for it.
Just running down my leg, yeah, like that.
Probably
Kate
the point
Bush
to remind
song.
people that this album beat out Hole.
Yes, it beat out Hole.
Yes.
Everything.
Okay,
that Hole. Though.
You know what? I don't think we want to talk about this anymore. We can get right to the voting.
Okay.
I mean, what else is there to say that we haven't already said about this? I mean, we've talked about many aspects about it: the recording, the different stories, the men she was with, the guy Carrie. I think I learned recently that the guy she was dating, he was living in a cave. I guess it was
like a cave on the beach. Yeah,
that's where he hung
just
out.
Just a random whore. Would you like to fuck?
Can we go back to your cave?
Ooh, you're so sexy! Wow.
You know what?
Like
You know what's funny is that is exactly the kind of forced falsetto that you hear all over this album. Because that's my other big criticism of this album. I don't think the songwriting is as tight as people give it credit for. Her singing is just atrocious at times, in my opinion. But okay, Corey, to your point, let's vote. And I'm actually up first, so while I'm talking here.
Yep.
Oh, God. I mean, the problem that I have here is if I'm looking at influence, as we said, Hunky Dory, very influential on where Bowie went after this. Blue, however, very influential on where music and a lot of other artists went after this. I don't want to listen to it again, but I think I have to acknowledge that in the grand scheme of things, it probably, in my mind anyway, deserves to be higher than Hunky Dory does. So I think it's Blue, whether I want to listen to it again or not. For me, I think it's Blue.
Oh, God, kill me now.
So if we're going to get rid of this, it's up to the two of you. Sorry.
Oh, thanks.
That is not a burden that I will wear, sir, and you damn well know it. Because I would rather flush Joni's Blue down the drain or the toilet into the cesspool. Because just no. Yeah, I acknowledge her influence. But no, I don't think it's as deep as you say. So, whatever. She's pretty shallow. This is pretty shallow. I didn't care for it. Hunky Dory. Corey, you decide.
It's all on Corey.
God.
Haha.
God damn it. I have to be consistent. I always go with the artist with the bigger influence. I always go with what made a difference in music. And there's a lot of music that we have and a lot of artists that we know and love that would not be here or would not have probably been as successful without Joni. And God damn it, I'm voting Blue.
I'm not listening to it again.
Well, that's on you, but it lives to fight another day then.
Whatever.
Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to win. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to win.
And like I said, the Bowie album is, I mean, like I said, so much better, I feel, than Ziggy Stardust. I think it's one of his best, but au revoir, Bowie.
C'est la vie.
This
Bowie.
is, I mean, Bowie.
Get the
So
fuck
now,
out.
just to remind people, like when we were doing that wild card round, there were a handful of artists, and you'll see this come up with the Beatles, particularly in future rounds. There were a handful of artists that had more than one album on the Rolling Stone Top 500. Bowie was one of them. If this had come up against a different Bowie album, it might be a different outcome. But this particular Bowie album, it is what it is. Sorry, Scott.
I'm sorry.
No, what?
We both apologized.
For what?
Believe me, I'm just as sorry as you are because I
For
don't.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know.
That's all good.
Because I don't love the album.
I don't agree that her influence is that fucking deep. But whatever.
Well,
Well, there's a lot of very well-known artists that would disagree with you on that.
I know. I'm shouted down by the majority. Yeah, okay.
Rick Beato is one of them too.
Yeah, Rick
Oh,
Beato's
really?
a twat.
Is he a big?
He is. He
had
had
Joni Mitchell.
He's a
he
big
had dinner
twat.
with her. He did a
Good
video
for him.
about it.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's cool. No, as an artist, I get Joni Mitchell as an artist. I just don't get her music. It's sometimes you can appreciate the artist over their output.
And I think this is one of those few times Rolling Stone got it right by putting her in the top 10.
I got good news. We're going to have time for this conversation in a future round now because
Yes.
Yeah.
she's coming back.
All right.
Hallelujah.
So, Dave, let's talk about.
Love.
Let's.
So you mentioned Rick Beato, which is a good sort of segue into our middle discussion here. So Rick Beato did a video recently where he was talking about this trend of artists using not samples exactly, but using bits of other well-known songs in their original work. So it's like original song, but it's got like a little snippet of it where it's very clear that they've like swiped the melody for from another well-known song. Actually, I think one of the first times I remember hearing this, I think it was Fall Out Boy a few years ago had a song that they had actually swiped the little snippet of the theme song from the Munsters and worked it into their song.
Fall Out Boy. And the Munsters theme, complete with Fred Gwynn coming through the door.
But Beato was talking about it primarily in the context of Dua Lipa. Actually, he was talking about it primarily in the context of a couple of videos that have gone viral recently. There's a guy you can find him on Instagram, or he posts on TikTok as @Martin Beauregard. But he has done videos recently where he has like shown off this phenomenon where he'll play a snippet of a recent song. A lot of the examples are Dua Lipa. And then he'll play you a snippet of a song from 10, 20, 30 years ago where it's very clear she's just swiped the whole thing. And I watched this video. I had seen the video. And when I saw it, my reaction was kind of the same as Rick Beato's, which is, how the hell is this legal? I don't understand how they're not getting sued left and right for copyright infringement. We've seen cases of Led Zeppelin, Stairway to Heaven. Like, they got sued because there was another song out there that kind of sounded vaguely like the guitar intro to Stairway to Heaven, but it wasn't even close. Like, these are just direct.
It was
rip-offs.
a reach.
It was absolutely a reach. But these are like just like, there's no question that they're yanking bits and pieces. Like, there's one Dua Lipa song that takes "Need You Tonight," the guitar riff from "Need You Tonight" by INXS. So Corey's going to drop in some of these examples here.
Dua Lipa, "Break My Heart."
But when you said hello, I knew that was the end of it all. I should have stayed.
INXS, "Need You Tonight." And post-production Corey has one more.
Rick Beato's reaction, and of course Rick's not, Rick is a music producer. He's a music lecturer. He's not a copyright expert, but he was asking the same question that I think I was asking. I think we were all asking, which, how is this legal? Well, as I've mentioned before on this show, my day job, I'm not a copyright lawyer, but I am actually a lawyer. I went and did some digging into this. Well, I can give you guys a little bit of background. So first of all, before we start here, let's go a little bit back. We had talked about in a previous show about copyright law and the different types of rights you get when a song gets made. When a song is made, there's two main copyrights that apply. First is the songwriter, the guy who comes up with the original idea for the song. If I sit down and I write a song and I never record it, it doesn't matter. I still own what we call the copyright or the publishing rights on that song, because that was my creative idea. Then, if I go into a studio and record it, and maybe I bring in other session musicians or my band and we record the song and put out like a single of it, then you've got a separate set of rights called the recording rights, who owns the actual rights to that specific recording of that song. And those two, you need to keep straight that those two sets of rights are separate and distinct from one another. The publishing rights and the recording rights are two separate things. So with that as background, there's some stuff that I know we've talked about before, like sampling. And feel free to jump in here anytime, guys. If I take big in hip hop, right? In fact, I think we talked about an album that we're going to be talking about on our next show. It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. There's so many samples on that if you tried to make it today, you probably wouldn't be able to afford it, because at the time that came out, the law was a little unclear on whether you could copyright a sample, but today the law is very clear. If I take a snippet, a direct sample of your recorded song, I owe you money, and I owe two pieces of money. Back to that main theme. I need to pay whoever wrote that little bit that I sampled, and I need to pay whoever owns the recording, the specific recording that I sampled.
So, quick question for you.
Yeah.
When you're at a sporting event, they play upwards of 6 seconds of a song and then stop. And that's how they get around not having to pay for the song? Is that they play...
No, they do. They do have to pay for the song. But usually they are, I think a lot of times they're buying like those little clips. A lot of public venues, I think, subscribe to services where the service will then pay royalties out to they distribute royalties kind of roughly equally based on how popular the songs are. So like if I play a clip from, we've talked about if you go to a sporting event and they're playing Rock and Roll Part 2 by Gary Glitter,
oh God,
that money is going into the pocket of a child molester because he actually owns that recording. Now I don't know all the mechanics about how the money gets from point A to point B, but he's definitely getting paid in that instance.
Right, because if you go to a baseball game, you hear the opening claps of Center Field by John Fogerty. But
yes.
Then it stops right after that. So I did wonder if there was some sort of rule if they only played a certain small amount of seconds, they didn't have to pay the royalty. But a lot
of people make that mistake, and there is no sort of like de minimis limit. If you use part of somebody else's recording, you owe them money, even if it's just a second of it. You owe them money.
Okay, good. I always thought, you know what? I always thought that was if you could get away with it in under 6 seconds. But I'm glad that's not the thing.
Yeah.
Good.
Now we do it all the time on this show, but there's a whole separate copyright concept called fair use, where if you are using it for educational purposes or for music criticism purposes, you can play a snippet to just sort of like illustrate a point, a particular piece of the song, and that you don't owe money on because it's sort of like academic use. But if you're using it for entertainment purposes, absolutely you owe that person money. And back to the main point, you owe two people money. You owe whoever wrote the song, and you owe whoever owns the recording, that particular recording that you used. All right. And then, so that's sampling. And then you have covers, which we've also talked about before. Bob Dylan records a song, it becomes popular, and then some local band wants to do a cover version of it. Bob Dylan gets paid. Now, usually the local band doesn't do the payment. If it's like a major re-release cover, like coming off of a label, then yeah, usually the artist is paying directly. But like if it's just your local bar band playing out, a lot of times those public venues, same deal. They have a service they subscribe to where they pay X dollars a month into this service, and it just kind of blanket covers the copyright for whatever songs get played in the venue. What we're talking about here, though, with this Dua Lipa example and these other examples that Corey dropped in, is it's not sampling because it's not using the actual recording. It's not covering because they're not doing a remake of the song, but they're just taking this little snippet, this recognizable riff, and then recording a new version of that, and then working that into the broader work. And what they refer to that is there's this concept called interpolation. Rick Beato and frankly all of us that heard that what the fuck is interpolation? So this is where I did some digging on it. But it's basically what I said. You are using a recognizable bit, but you're not taking a sample, you're not covering the whole song, you're just basically covering a riff and working it into a larger piece. Rick's point was, how is this legal? Like, if I have to pay for samples, it's clear I have to pay money. If I do a cover, it's clear I have to pay money. How is this legal? Well, it was an interesting question, but it turns out the answer is less controversial than it seems, because the way that this is legal is somebody gets paid. It actually turns out that when you do interpolate songs and you take a snippet and re-record it, you actually still have to pay somebody. But let's talk about who. You are not using the actual recording because it's not a sample, so I don't owe any money to anybody who has previously recorded that song, but I do still owe money to the publisher, the person who came up with the creative concept for that riff. So if in that example we gave earlier where Dua Lipa does a song that brings in the guitar riff from Need You Tonight by INXS, she owes money to the estate of Michael Hutchence, who wrote that guitar riff.
Right. So, and Rick Beato did show that Tim Ferriss and Michael Hutchence were listed as writers of that song.
Right.
And not all of the examples, though, gave credit where credit was due.
Well, the question is, does that? I don't know how much that matters. As long as the people get paid, I don't know if you need to necessarily list them as a writer on the song. Probably that has to do somewhat with whatever deal you negotiate to because remember, every license deal is different. So when Dua Lipa is doing this with INXS, she's negotiating with whoever owns the rights to that INXS song. When she's doing it with another song, she's negotiating with whoever owns the rights to that song. And some of them could say, I want a writing credit, and some of them could say, I don't care if I get a writing credit as long as I get my money.
Now, what about those that have not given any credit and just oh no, that's our own thing?
What do you mean?
Well, are there any of these that have just, even though these examples have come up, I don't know if all of them have actually acknowledged that they've quote unquote.
Oh yeah, I don't know.
Lifted.
I mean, there could be hidden lawsuits out there just waiting to happen because they didn't pay the money. Legally speaking, they should be paying the money to the person who published the song. Again, they don't owe any money to anybody who recorded it before that, but the actual person who wrote that riff, they owe money to. I can't guarantee they're paying them in every single instance, but legally they're supposed to be.
So the original songwriter's supposed to get paid, which that actually makes sense.
Yep, 100%.
To me, it still feels like cheating.
Yeah.
You're using a riff, you're using something familiar to get your song out because people will, in the back of their mind, it's almost like you're like, oh, this sounds familiar. I like this. But you're liking it for the wrong reason.
Yeah, it's one, they say, what was it? Mimicry is flattery.
Oh yeah, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
Yeah, but it's really not, though, because if you're imitating it, then you're just a knockoff version of that, and you need to be something different. Music isn't about just repeating someone else. And that's why Dua Lipa's not really one of my favorites. I mean, some of her tunes are catchy, but you know why. So.
Paying homage to a sound or genre is one thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you, Corey. Like it's sort of like a cheap ploy to kind of get more listens. But I mean, listen, most of the as we said earlier, most of mainstream music is that these days.
Very much so.
But the key here is it's cheaper. If I had sampled the song, I owe money to the publisher and the owner of the recording. By interpolating the song, I only owe money to the publisher. So I can get away with having the exact same riff, but I only have to pay one person, not two.
Wow.
So that's why this has gotten so popular, because it's essentially sampling without sampling.
It is. And yet, music can be so subjective that you could be pulling a riff and you may not have even heard the original song to the best of your knowledge. These young kids may have heard Kiss's I Was Made for Loving You probably when they were walking through a department store and didn't realize they were listening to it. And then they were creating something later
Trying to think of a department store playing I Was Made for Loving You by Kiss.
Zayers.
It's theirs. I heard it at Woolworth. But I mean, there is sometimes that people have created something and they can say that they've never heard the original.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's true.
Yeah,
it's
it's true
possible.
now. These days it is,
because there's so much out there.
So let's use that as a jumping off point to talk about loops and beats. Loops, what do I mean by a loop or beat? So that one whole in kind of cottage industry that has grown up in music as it's gotten easier and easier to do home recordings is somebody will come up with a riff. They don't write a whole song. They just come up with what they think is a really interesting riff. Maybe it's 2 to 10 seconds, and they will sell that. Usually once they put that out there, other artists can then take that loop or take that little, depending on who you ask, some people call it a beat, some people call it a loop. They will take that loop and just incorporate it into their own works. And this is perfectly legal because there's a whole marketplace for this stuff. There are artists out there that make a lot of money by just writing like 4-second snippets and putting them up online for people to use. Where do you find them? Well, like I said, there's these online beat stores where you can download these loops and use. Other places you find them is a lot of DAWs, digital audio workstations. So like we're recording this right now, all of us are using a DAW. I use Logic Pro, which is kind of Apple's proprietary DAW. Scott, I think you use Ableton Lite, right? Corey uses a program called Reaper, but they all do basically the same thing. A lot of those programs come with built-in loops that are free to use. In fact, last several shows, we've had a little intro where you hear sort of like some strings coming in at the beginning. I built that entire thing just using loops that were built into Logic, because by buying a copy of Logic, you get the right to use those all you want. Just to kind of give an example of how this all works, though. So I don't think a lot of people are familiar with the song Old Town Road by Lil Nas X. Lil Nas X came out 4 or 5 years ago. It was his debut single. Came out in December 2018. He was writing music and making music at home. There was a Dutch producer by the name of Young Keo who had written a loop and made it available on one of these beat stores. And Lil Nas went online and he bought it for $30. And he used that as the basis for the song Old Town Road. Took him 1 day to write the song, partly because he had this loop to work with. The song takes off. It gets huge on TikTok. Eventually it enters the Billboard charts. Goes diamond in October a year later for selling 10 million units in the U.S.
Lord.
So he's using this beat that was created by Young Keo, and he's built this hugely successful song out of it. So who gets paid? Well, Young Keo gets paid with the $30 that he got paid.
Yeah.
So Young Keo definitely gets paid, but possibly some other folks as well. And let me kind of explain where some of the pitfalls are with this. Lil Nas, first of all, he buys this beat online for $30. But when you buy a beat online, whoever puts it online has the ability to put whatever restrictions they want to put on it. Like some of them will say, you're only allowed to use this if you credit me. Some of them will say, you're only allowed to use it for like non-commercial use. In the case of Lil Nas, he paid this $30 to Young Keo, but I'm not sure exactly what the point that this triggered at, but once the song became huge, Young Keo comes back and went, the little agreement, terms and conditions that you agreed to when you bought on the beat store, we need to talk about renegotiating this. And so Lil Nas actually had to go back and like negotiate a separate agreement with Young Keo. It's not even uncommon to have to pay like a percentage of royalties over to whoever created the beat. So Young Keo gets paid, but then who else gets paid? In this particular case, Young Keo, when he created that loop, had included a sample of 34 Ghosts by 9 Inch Nails into that loop.
Wow.
Now you have these layers upon layers. Lil Nas buys it from Young Keo. He owes money to Young Keo. But Young Keo built the loop using 9 Inch Nails songs, so now he owes money to 9 Inch Nails and Trent Reznor. So you've got these like layers upon layers. That second part, in this case, thankfully for Lil Nas, it turned out not to be an issue because once the song took off, his people actually called Trent Reznor and it's like, we just figured out this loop includes your song in it. Apparently when Young Keo made this loop, he didn't even know who 9 Inch Nails were.
Unbelievable.
Wow.
But Trent Reznor liked the song so much that he just gave him clearance to use it without charging any additional royalties because Trent Reznor has enough money that he just doesn't care, basically.
Good on him.
Yeah, I mean, it was very nice of him, but the thing could have been a shit show because not only did he have to go back and renegotiate with Young Keo, he could have potentially ended up giving Trent Reznor a huge chunk of the royalties off of this song, too.
Okay, this is Lil Nas X with the loop, Young Keo's loop in it.
I got the horses in the back.
And this is the 9 Inch Nails version, 34 Ghosts.
This stuff is out there. It has made music production easier and easier and easier, but you got to be careful and read the fine print because, I mean, there's a lot that can go wrong if the sample includes, number one, if you use it beyond the terms and conditions of whatever you agreed to when you bought it. But then number two, if the sample, like this 9 Inch Nails thing, is include layers upon layers, you could end up paying money to a whole lot of people.
Wow. I do give Little Nas's management team credit for being preemptive once they learned that.
Yeah, for sure.
To be like, hey, we didn't realize, but hey, we need to make a deal with you. And good on Trent to be like, fuck it, just use it.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, it probably helped that Trent Reznor had enough money that he just doesn't care so much anymore. But
he could have been an asshole about it.
Right.
So the next time, so there you go. So the next time you hear a song and you're like, wait a minute, isn't that the guitar part from so-and-so? Yeah, probably is. And probably so-and-so is getting paid. It turns out it's not very controversial because, again, as long as the money flows into the right pockets, it's all straight up.
That's the thing is it's about the money. It's not about the creativity anymore.
Well, I mean, that's been the case of the music industry forever.
That's true.
Here was the other big song discussed in interpolation. It's a song by Miley Cyrus and Dua Lipa called Prisoner that takes 2 other songs you'll hear here. I Was Made for Loving You by Kiss. Physical by Olivia Newton-John.
All right.
All right.
So there you go. Interpolation.
Interpolation.
And that's how they do it in Japan, children.
That's how they're playing metal in Japan now?
Ladies and gentlemen, Emmy winner, Tom Selleck.
In this time and age when so much is uncertain, in our community, there is still one constant, our appreciation of great artists and their talent. Although they may be gone, their work lives on.
1999 by Prince. Kimono My House by Sparks. Live at Folsom Prison by Johnny Cash. Sister Lovers by Big Star. Stand, Sly and the Family Stone. The Songs of Leonard Cohen by Leonard Cohen. Television, Marquee Moon. Elvis Presley's debut album, Elvis Presley. And Jagged Little Pill by... Hey, come on, cut that out. Guys, this is come on, it's a public theater. There's kids watching this. That is not... Can we get security down here, please?
All right. Come on, guys. We're going to have to ask Italy. Hey, wait a minute. You're the guy from Full House? Hey, my kids love that show. Can I get an autograph? Oh, wait, I mean, yeah, pull your pants up. I don't want you to sign in with that, you know.
All right, we ready?
Yeah, let's move on to round 3 here.
All right.
Ding, ding.
Our third matchup has some of the best studio and rock musicians of all time. Believe it or not, our challengers today are Led Zeppelin, another band returning in the bracket of March Sadness, with their 1975 double album Physical Graffiti. We recently spoke of Houses of the Holy on our last show, Blurred Lines, where we lauded Led Zeppelin for their eclectic choices and stepping outside of their blues rock comfort zone. And somehow this album feels more ambitious on that front as a double album. They just had a whole lot of love to give, and so they gave it. It is hard to ignore a song as stellar and timeless as Kashmir that was mistakenly quoted as being on Zeppelin 4 in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Something tells me it was either an inside joke with Cameron Crowe, or he was just trying to make the character that told him to put it on seem like an idiot because he claimed to be worldly and knowledgeable about music. Anyways, I digress. Led Zeppelin takes on a very well-loved on this show, Asia by Steely Dan. Asia is truly a musician's album with timeless tracks that most everyone has heard or knows some dude that says, oh yeah, Steely Dan, that's my go-to album when I'm getting down with the ladies. You know, the Cuervo Gold, Fire Color of You, make
different album, but yeah.
a wonderful thing. No? I was the only one with that roommate in college.
He went. What?
Yeah, dude, when I heard FM playing from his room, I knew he had just dropped the Greatest Hits album, was trying to make his own Greatest Hits. Anyways, Asia is a perfect blend of jazz, rock, and pop, with some of the best sought-after studio musicians playing on these songs. And Steely Dan found themselves here after beating out I Want to See the Bright Lights Tonight by Richard and Linda Thompson, then Red-Headed Stranger by Willie Nelson, and then toppling the Velvet Underground and Nico by John Cale, Lou Reed, doing their best not to strangle Krista Pafkin, whilst Andy Warhol watched with an awkward hand in his pants.
And that bar wasn't set very high. I'm just going to say.
Led Zeppelin beat out Blood on the Tracks by Bob Dylan, and then Criminal Minded by Boogie Down Productions. So let's begin with Led Zeppelin and Physical Graffiti.
We're going backwards again.
Okay. Yeah, we are. Well, I'm going with we take the one that's lower ranked first, the Challenger.
Is that why you're doing that? Okay,
that's why I've been doing it. Yeah,
I didn't need. Consider us schooled. Okay, but yeah, what a great album, right?
So Physical Graffiti, double album. It was the 6th album in as many years. So this was like the height of their output at this point. This is your point, Corey, is right after Houses of the Holy. And interestingly enough, includes the song Houses of the Holy, which is not on the album Houses of the Holy, because they decided that when they were doing Houses of the Holy, that wasn't good enough to make the cut, basically. So this is a double album because they had a lot lower standard for what would make the cut, frankly.
Yeah.
They're like, we got all this shit laying around. Why don't we put it on one album?
Yeah, and this was why I kind of reacted the way I did when Scott said, what a great album, because it's one great album and one not so great album. The discipline that they used to cut Houses of the Holy from the album Houses of the Holy, they could have used the same discipline here. They basically felt like they had written enough material for a disc and a half, and then it would just become like, okay, what can we throw on here just to fill it out to a double album? It's good, but this is not their best work, in my opinion, because of that filler effect.
I have a hard time paring this down to be a single album, but because of trying to cut tracks. But if I said, wait a minute, if I could make 2 separate albums and use all these tracks, that would be more effective, because some of these do flow together better. That you could have put them on separate albums, I think it would have worked a lot better. I mean, don't get me wrong.
The other thing they could have done here was also just cut down some of these songs, because some of these songs went on way too effing long. So In My Time of Dying, which was based on an old gospel song called Jesus Make Up My Dying Bed, 11 minutes and 5 seconds.
That's
and a big chunk of it is just Jimmy Page showing off on slide guitar, and he plays an okay slide guitar, but
it was a lot of musical masturbation from Mr. Page.
Yeah.
He just all over this thing.
In addition to being more careful about what songs you include or don't include, like they could have just trimmed some of these songs down and made more room.
Yeah, for real. It would have made sense.
When your guitar player and songwriter is also your producer, there's not a lot of discipline that is coming from a producer that goes, Jimmy.
Yeah.
That conversation doesn't happen.
Mr. Page is well known for being a studio snob.
Well, and of course, every 4 or 5 years, he has to release another remastered version of every album. I don't understand that.
Yeah, I don't either.
That's a money grab.
It is.
I started on a negative, but there's a lot of positive here. I mean, Kashmir is one of their best. Trampled Underfoot is fantastic.
Yeah.
Like this is. I'm not trying to suggest this is a bad album. It could have used a little bit more discipline, is all, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, for real. Kashmir. Wow. Just wow.
Even if that song is over 8 minutes.
Yeah.
It still works.
People talk about Led Zeppelin a lot of times. What you think of is Bonham, right? And Bonham we talk about Page's guitar, but Bonham's drumming was phenomenal too. One of the things that works about Kashmir, and I just realized it listening to it this time, was Bonham's decision not to follow the guitar part. Kashmir uses that sort of very weird, that climbing, those little triplets. It would have been very easy for like a drummer to go but instead Bonham actually keeps like sort of a standard like 2/4 time behind it, and so what happens is the guitar gets a little syncopated from the drums and then it phases back in. It was just a really smart move on Bonham's part.
It was one of those moments where it was like the drummer needed to step back and fill in what needed to be done.
Yeah, they work so well together as musicians, and you're just like, oh man, that's the kind of timing you love as a musician, and when you can achieve that.
Usually, when you're talking about Bonham, like you're not crediting him for being understated, but like this is one of those points where he was understated, and it worked so well.
True.
Agreed. Absolutely agree.
You mentioned Trampled Underfoot, where John Paul Jones is on clavinet. That's funny. It's like, yeah, cool. That makes it even
In
cooler.
fact, that's what
Yeah.
Stevie Wonder was just playing recently.
They were
really?
they were inspired when they wrote that. They were inspired by Stevie Wonder. They were trying to get a Stevie Wonder sound. So that like sort of funky groove on the clavinet that they were playing was really trying to be sort of like a Stevie Wonder song.
Yeah, that the instrument he uses to play Higher Ground.
So there is a lot to love about the album. But there's
Oh,
also
there is.
a lot to, scrape off and feed to the cat, as it were.
I just still think it would have been a better album if it had been a single, not a double.
Concur.
They tried too hard to make it a double.
Yeah.
Or you do what other bands then did later years, like Guns N' Roses with Use Your Illusion. They just released two separate albums.
Yeah.
And maybe you do that.
Yeah, or the better stuff they could have just held for a subsequent release too. Just like they held it from Houses of the Holy, they could have held in like, okay, let's wait until we got a little bit more.
Yeah.
And this was still an era where you had B-sides
Yeah,
that
that's
you could
true.
release.
Exactly. So
You did have that option.
I don't think we're the only ones seeing some of these flaws because, Corey, you like to talk about how things progressed during past Rolling Stone lists. So in 2003, this was at 70. In 2012, it had fallen to 73. In the 2020 list, it had fallen to 144. So, as the years go by, even Rolling Stone is moving this one further and further down.
yeah.
Cashmere alone keeps this thing ranked as high as it does.
Yes.
I get it. The hype around one song can be a lot, but there is a but there. And, some stuff's just, more influential, it's better, whatever, so.
So, and
Moving
speaking about discipline, now you come over to Asia.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fagan and Becker.
You
Yikes.
talk about military discipline here, comparatively. Down to every single note.
Yeah.
Down to every single note, and to the point where there was essentially no band left at this point. It was really just Walter Becker and Donald Fagen coming in with a vision. They'd come up with like a chord progression. They'd come up with where they want the song to go, and then they just brought in session musicians, often over and over and over again. They'd bring in a guitar player to lay down a guitar part and say, not exactly what we're looking for. Let's bring in another guitar player tomorrow and try it again. I think when we talked about this the first time, this perfectionism in the studio, Donald Fagen, I think I mentioned this on Home at Last, the chorus starts with the words, well, the. He recorded that like 70 times because he didn't like the way he was saying, well, the. That's the sort of like meticulous precision that they applied to this entire album.
Astounding.
It is a study in perfectionism.
Yeah.
Down to, like we just said, every last note. You had studio musicians come in and do a take 30 times. At the end of the day, that's not even the take that was used because somebody came in and did it better.
What they created is this album, and every song on it is memorable. You're just like, oh, crap.
Every song is memorable, and that perfectionism paid off because, as we noted last time we talked about it too, this got nominated for a few Grammys, but the one Grammy that it won was Best Engineered Non-Classical Recording.
Yeah.
Just people recognize just the quality of the recording. If you listen to it through a set of headphones, every instrument just sits in its own space. Like there's no bleed over, there's no crossover. It is, well, I think we also mentioned that like when you're selling hi-fi stereos, like a lot of places like now defunct Circuit City or Best Buy or whatever, if you're going in to buy a high-end stereo, they'll put this album on because they're trying to show off how well the stereo reproduces the precision of the recording.
It is cheating, but yes, I can't say anything bad about this album.
No, not really, no.
It's really hard to because they made the effort. They made a true effort to make this album. I mean, all the Steely Dan albums have that caliber of excellence. It's like, no, it's going to be above this line.
Yeah, I really don't even look at it as being pretentious either, because it's like, no, this is what we want to do, and this is how we're going to do it. They didn't lie about it. It's like, okay, we're going to just do it this way.
And the other thing this album gets a lot of credit for is they had been trying for a while to fuse popular rock music and jazz together.
Right.
With mixed amounts of success. This is like the first album where they kind of put that formula together in a way where like there are music professors out like jazz theorists who are just constantly blown away by this.
All right, we ready to vote?
I think so.
Yeah,
all right.
Corey, you're actually up first on this one.
I love Zeppelin. I love Kashmir. But goddamn, do I love this Asia album.
Yeah.
It's perfection. It is, when somebody goes, well, what can you call a perfect album? What can you point to an album that really encapsulates everything down to the engineering, down to the production? And it's Asia. So that's That's my vote.
Short and simple, Asia.
Mine doesn't matter, but we would have been unanimous. I mean, just based on the filler aspect alone. I talked about graffiti. Physical graffiti has all this filler on it. Man, there's no filler on Asia. Yeah. None. And so that alone is enough to put it over the top.
It's concise.
I love Zeppelin, but really, I love some of their other albums a lot more. So this one doesn't feel like a loss.
No, I think we all agreed that Houses of the Holy was like one of our favorites.
And we're not done we're not done with Zeppelin either, because of what I said earlier about the Beatles. Like, they're another one of these acts that has multiple albums in the list. So they are still in contention, just not with this album.
Righto.
All right, let's do this.
Rolling.
Our final match today brings us an odd British pairing. The Rolling Stones come out swinging with their only album left in March Sadness, and that album is Some Girls, a very straightforward and raw sound with energy and spontaneity that were aspects that made the Rolling Stones the Rolling Stones. This was after a handful of some melancholic albums after Exile on Main Street, and it was a nice return to their old sound. The guitars of Keith Richards and Ronnie Wood are front and center and driven by one of the best rhythm sections in rock and roll, Bill Wyman and Charlie Watts. They're not showy, but their ability to create and hold a pocket with precision groove should be absolutely noted through everywhere. The album is eclectic in its diversity of music, but keep in mind, this is 1978, and Richards and Jagger are pulling from rock, disco, punk, and country, but truly making it their own. The Stones find themselves taking on Amy Winehouse and her Back to Black album, a piece of art that brilliantly encapsulates a train wreck in progress, with Amy's personal exploration of love, heartbreak, addiction, and self-destruction. You didn't need Miss Cleo to predict the trajectory that Amy was on. Back to Black brings back elements of Phil Spector's Wall of Sound, Motown, and 1960s soul. And Amy found herself here by beating out the Queen of Soul herself, Aretha Franklin, with her Amazing Grace album. Then went on to defeat the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, and finally toppled Lucinda Williams' Car Wheels on Gravel Road. The Stones, we answered the age-old question, beat out the Beatles' Let It Be, and then Neil Young's Harvest to be here today. So, let's start with the Stones, because it's only rock and roll, but I like it.
Oh my God.
I know.
Okay.
Cheesy.
Wah, wah, wah. Yeah.
As you said, it's the last Stones album that we have in contention, but unfortunately for them, it's also the lowest rated Stones album that was on the Rolling Stone list.
And yet we don't understand that at all.
It's another one that's been declining. So like in 2003, they had it at 269, so it never made it past the halfway point, number one. In 2012, they dropped it one notch from 269 to 270, but then in the 2020 list, all the way from 270 down to 468, so damn near off the list altogether. And I don't get it, because it is a great album.
I kind of get it, just because like perhaps the lyrical content just doesn't resonate with people anymore. It really did in 1978. It really did.
But we've had a lot of albums that are in the top 100 whose lyrical content has not aged either.
I know.
This is quintessential Stones here.
It is. I agree.
And Tattoo You should be on here. I know y'all dogged Exile on Main Street, but that one was, I think because it was a double album, it was another one with some filler. But those were some quintessential Stones albums that define them. And I feel like this album is just, it's being ignored, and I don't know why.
Well, and they fixed some problems from Exile on Main Street, too. Like, when we talked about Exile on Main Street, one of the things we pointed out was that the mix was not great. Like, even Keith... not Keith. Even Mick has said if he could go back and remix one Stones album, it would be Exile, because, like, the vocals are inaudible at times. This one is, like, pitch perfect. I mean, it's hard to listen to this and see what else they could have done different in the studio.
Totally.
Exile was in a basement or someone's cellar in France, and yeah, because they were in exile.
This album, too, musically speaking, is much stronger.
Oh yeah, you have Shattered, you have Beast of Burden.
Yeah, classics.
But not only that, it is like I said, it's a quintessential Stones sound. It is Keith and Ronnie playing off of each other. It's that solid rhythm section that just holds it all together. People do not give Charlie and Bill Wyman enough credit for what they could do as a rhythm section.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, as happens with a lot of bands, all the focus was on the guitar player and the singer, and the rhythm section kind of got short shrift. But this was tight, absolutely tight
for sure.
There's a ton of energy here. There's a ton of fun here. You can tell they were just enjoying themselves from start to finish on this. Back when we talked about the first time, we said we thought it was ranked way too low, frankly. So
agreed. I think this is still just I do talk about points in time where you get like Miss You. That does have a little bit of that disco feel, but I still wouldn't loop it in with disco because they made it their own.
Well, what's funny about that is I mean, I think when this came out in 78, disco was at front and center, and I think everybody heard a disco beat. The reality is, in 2024, if you listen to this, I'm not sure most people would listen to it and say that's a disco sound anymore.
Right.
My point exactly.
Right.
I think that they were able to take other sounds and other genres, and like I said, they made it their own. They made it a Stones song.
Yep.
Again, for a band, speaking like we did of Zeppelin, the Stones here, peak songwriting. So, good stuff.
And you know what year was this?
78.
So 81 you get Tattoo You, which I still think is a fantastic album.
But then we have, going back to we're at a point where there's really not a lot of bad albums left. It's the competition is pretty fierce here too, because the Winehouse album is also fantastic.
Yeah.
It is.
So this is, Corey alluded to this earlier, this is Amy Winehouse's like one really big album, and she found this sound of like melding, really innovative idea, melding like old 60s soul music and old 60s R&B sounds, and pitch perfect too. I mean, like if you just played the musical track for somebody and told them that this was recorded in 1968, they'd probably believe you. But then you add her lyrics, which are very modern problems, talking about her failed relationships, talking about her addiction, talking about her flaws, and very honestly too, which is something I noticed this time too. Like there's an awful lot of points on this album where she even acknowledges that some of her behaviors are not healthy and puts the blame on herself more than anybody else around her. One song where she's talking about being behind the scenes relationship with a married man, and if you listen closely, and of course he doesn't leave his wife for her. He leaves her, not the wife. If you listen to the lyrics closely, like there's a couple of points where she's like, I ought to know better. Like I don't know why I do this to myself. It's very much putting the blame on herself more so than him.
This album is really a collection of very beautiful songs written by a very sad and depressed person. Oof. Yeah, it hits hard because it is so much that. Does it really deserve that spot here due to that, or through, or the songwriting, it is innovative. Yeah, it's different.
We said last time she might have gotten a little bit of bump just by virtue of the tragedy of her dying young.
Right.
Take that away and you still have a very solid work here.
You do. However,
you do.
Is it as influential as perhaps, what it's up against? It's like, I just don't see that, critically speaking, from a critical point of view, if you remove all empathy for it. Yeah.
Well,
Sure.
Again, going back to the history of this, when in 2012 they had this, 2003 it wasn't on the chart or the Rolling Stone list at all. 2012 they brought it in at 451, and then all of a sudden 2020 rolls around and they bump it from 451 all the way up to 33.
Come on, no.
That feels like maybe an overreaction.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Somebody heard it and went, oh, it really moved me. It's like, yes, it does do that. It does that. Good music will move you. Does it?
Yes.
But don't do that, because it doesn't really need that sort of bump on the list. But anyway.
All right. I think we can vote.
Okay.
Let's wrap this up. So, Dave.
God, I'm up first, huh?
Wrap it with your...
Yikes, dude.
Go ahead.
Do I think it deserves to be at 33? No. Do I think that it is? I mean, just that sound that she found, it was so innovative and so well executed that I think I still got to go with Amy Winehouse. I mean, not that I don't like the Stones album, but I think I still got to go with Amy Winehouse in this particular instance.
Scott?
Okay. Well, look, I can't vote for sad music for Suicide Girls. And honestly, Rolling Stones were just, much more musically interesting and long-lasting and influential. So I'm going with the Stones, of Corey.
Yeah, I think going into the 80s, a lot of the sounds that the Stones were doing here did set up a lot of other bands. I mean, they were able to influence bands anew. They did it in the 60s, and they did it again here. And this Amy Winehouse album, don't get me wrong, is absolutely fantastic.
It is.
Absolutely. I mean, her neo-soul and everything else she kind of like brought back and reinvented is brilliant, but
that sound, I will say, because it's pretty clear, like we're about to eliminate it here. I was thinking if Dusty Springfield had lived long enough to develop a crack habit, she probably would have been Amy Winehouse.
That is the best analogy I've heard. Dusty Springfield with a crack habit. Springfield with a crack habit.
So yes, I am. I'm going with the Stones.
Thank you. I would have had to come down there and smack you if you had voted the other way. Jesus.
No, I feel like I don't know. I feel like the Stones have been getting shit on a lot.
They have, but honestly, and Amy Winehouse is fantastic, and I do love the album. I just don't understand why it's so damn high on the list. It's like, come on, that's ridiculous. Yeah. So
okay, so that leaves one more show to settle out. Go on.
So we're at a little bit of a milestone here. So you've heard me say a million times, 192 albums. That when you count up the original bracket and the wild card, that's how many albums we have considered. As of this very moment, we have now eliminated 172 of those, and we have exactly 20 remaining.
Dun, dun, dun.
Wow.
Exactly 20 remaining, and next time around, 4 more of them get the X and get down to our final 16.
And who are our next matchups?
Our next matchups, thank you for asking. Made reference to this album earlier, It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back by Public Enemy will be coming up against Led Zeppelin 4. We have Synchronicity by The Police, which will be taking on Abbey Road by The Beatles. Van Halen's debut album versus the White Album by The Beatles, because as I said earlier, The Beatles are one of those acts that had multiple albums still remaining. And then finally, Prince's Purple Rain will come head-to-head with Bob Dylan's Bringing It All Back Home.
Bye, Bob.
Don't say goodbye just yet. We thought Joni was going away.
Christ, why, you two? Why? That was not necessary. But we'll argue about that next time, or maybe some other time. Not next time.
No,
not next time.
Okay, all right.
Not next time, but we will definitely have that argument.
Find out who will get surgically removed. Walk around squeaking like a dog toy for a week. Ringer, ringer.
Every dog in the neighborhood's following you like you're the Pied Piper. Squeaky toy, squeaky toy, squeaky toy.
Jesus. Yeah.
All right, I think that's a good place to stop this. So thank you all for coming out, and we'll check you out next time. So
we'll buy you a big old pot pie next time. It'll have like carrots and onions and potatoes, and it'll have some fish.
I love a good pot pie.
Maybe a little weed, maybe like some Doggy Star Light, or perhaps Amstel Light. Wait, that's a beer. You could have beer in it, I suppose. Maybe some celery, a couple of onions. Oh, I said onions, didn't I? Cumin, a little cumin.
Maybe leeks.
I think garlic. Oh, leeks are lovely, aren't they? I love a good leek. Oh, yes.
So do I, especially now with to avoid prostate issues.
That's what my doctor says. Yeah, that's why I masturbate so frequently. Oh, wait, was I supposed to say that? Oh, probably not.
Oh, I hear Portishead playing.
My baloney has a first name. It's O-S-C-A-R. My baloney.